All right. Hi, everyone. It's Carol here, and I'm so excited, Sarah, that we're going to turn the tables today and actually hear from you. You're so good at interviewing other people and getting perspectives from everyone else, but this is an exciting day to be able to actually hear from you and all of your perspectives. And, just as a starting point, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for running for mayor for our great city of Toronto. I really, I'm just so thankful, and I know a lot of other people are too, because honestly, it provides us an opportunity for change in leadership. It provides us a chance to have new leadership. And in addition to that, it infuses the city with new ideas, which we so desperately need. And it also just keeps our participatory democracy alive and well, and you are such an advocate for that. So overall, I just wanted to, start by saying thank you for running for mayor. And I know it's a big job and a big challenge to do something like this and to take on something like this. And we all find change can be hard and challenging, and sometimes we even resist change. But as you know, as someone who I've been friends and colleagues with for decades, change can actually just lead to some pretty amazing things and can lead to great things and things for the better. So thank you for working so hard on all of our behalf, everyone in the city, to offer our city some new and exciting change. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. And I appreciate that encouragement, because it is, sometimes a little bit daunting, because there is this lack of attention to municipal politics. And I've always been really passionate about it. I mean, I feel like I've wanted to run for mayor for so long. And the first time I ran was like the culmination of that. And I just have this dream of all the things a mayor could do. And so when I encounter, a lack of information, a lack of interest, or a lack of energy in the media, for the possibilities, I can get frustrated. So it's very lovely to hear your words and to hear that encouragement from people who say, no, it's totally worth it. It's such a great thing to do. And I encourage my fellow mayoral candidates the same way. Some of them have less profile than I do, less media profile, haven't been invited to all the debates, and they can feel discouraged. And I feel that their participation is equally valuable, because they have really good ideas too. All of us do. All Torontonians have good ideas. So if I can show what it's like to stand up for your ideas, and that inspires other people to do it, then that's already a success for me. So, and just to add a little note about you, Carol, I just want to thank you so much for doing this. You've been a huge support to me, not just in this campaign, but the last campaign I wrote, and of course that I ran in, and of course the whole course of our friendship and professional relationship too. And so when I had a few people suggested as podcast hosts for this Switch interview, and what I felt was having a friend who I knew there's nothing wrong I can say, and there's everything. We've talked about so much, we've shared so much, and it creates a very comforting environment for me to speak. So, and I want to feel like that with our city too, right? So why not start with that in this conversation? So thank you, Carol. And listeners will have heard a little bit of information about you in my intro, and I also will put that in the description of this episode, because I've been wanting to have you as a podcast guest myself, and we'll probably do that post-election. So we'll get to talk more about you the next time. So thank you for doing this.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And this is about you, and it is so true that what you say about inspiring others, it is just so true. Anything that we're passionate about, and I have my passions too, as you know, anything that we're passionate about, where we think we can affect some change, is worth doing. And, why not? Like, I think there can so often be a sense of, well, if I can't win, and I'm not saying you wouldn't win, like you could absolutely be our next mayor, which would just be so wonderful and awesome. But I can see how lots of other people, how many people are running, like
31, I think.
31 people. I can see how a lot of those people could easily say, well, no one's even heard of me, so why would I bother? but there is always a reason. If you have passion, if you have something to offer, then it's always worth doing, right? And change generally in life and in society and for people happens in very small steps. So why not give it a go? And why not, share some ideas that maybe they don't get implemented instantly, but maybe they get implemented gradually, and that's a good thing too. So anyway, again, enough about the thank you so much for running for mayor, but I really do feel that way, and I'm sure thousands and thousands and thousands of others do too, because they don't want to do it. So thank you for doing it. But back over to you. I'd love to just ask you some questions, and they're kind of broad questions. We just have a few, but I'd love to make them broad questions, because then I think it's a chance to really hear from you about your vision for the city and what you see going forward. So if I could just start asking you some questions, I'd love to.
Please.
Yeah, so you say you've always kind of wanted to run for mayor and always been interested in municipal politics, which I know, having known you for so long, and you've been so involved for so long and so passionate for so long. So I know that about you. But in all of that, in all of your time being so interested, what do you really see right now as the challenges that we're facing in Toronto? Like where are we today in terms of our biggest challenges, would you say, if you had to kind of think about the top three or whatever? What are the biggest ones?
Yeah, so let me just think about my day today and what I felt. I mean, I had a meeting with some women who are trying to get benches put in their local park. And some of them are older adults who need a break. They went to the farmer's market, they wanted to rest mid shop. And so they asked the manager of the market. She said, that's a great idea. We'd love to have benches for our shoppers. And then she emailed the city and has just been receiving the runaround. It's so many layers of bureaucracy. It's so complicated to get the bench. There's issues over funding. There's issues over process. And so that's the kind of thing where I go, it's not so expensive to pay for a bench. It's not so difficult to put a bench in there, and it's a really valuable thing to have. So why is the process so difficult? And if it is about funding, well, there's ways to solve it. I'm sure if you ask those farmers market people every week, would you donate $5 to the bench? Pretty soon you'd have the money you need for the bench, right? So the funding's not the obstacle, it's the political will. So that's one example of a challenge I see, where why are easy solutions to real problems not put in? There's also just, there's safety on the street. So I rode my bicycle today. I am lucky because I live in the area of city where there's actually a pretty good connection by bicycle. So I personally had a pretty safe route. There were very few places where I was concerned about my safety. But when I've gone to other places, for instance, in Scarborough or Etobicoke, there's not really safe routes for me to use. And there's not even safe routes within those areas for residents to use. And so it bothers me that our whole city doesn't have that option. Why should I need to borrow my parents' car to go to Etobicoke? Because there's not good enough transit to go there, because there's not a safe bike route for me. That means when I'm in that car, I'm taking up road space, in front of someone at a red light. I'm using a parking space. I'm creating, whatever environmental costs there are to that car trip. And, that's my responsibility. I did that, yet I didn't really want to. And if there were better options, I would have. We often talk about the war on cars, and I totally disagree about that characterization, because what I would like to do with our streets is make it so that anyone who wants to drive, who loves driving, I'm not just trying to stop people from driving. I'm trying to make our streets safe and our transit good, so that all the people who actually would rather not drive, at least would rather not drive in Toronto, don't have to. And so, I was at an event with a woman, a lawn bowling event, and she offered me a ride to the subway in her car. It was the most beautiful vintage car. She had everything. She was like, she loved driving. She loved her car. She, would drive to Florida from time to time. And to me, it's like, that person that's who, if she wants to drive, like, more power to her, right? But why can't the person who doesn't want to drive find a bus? Why can't the person who would, is stuck and they can barely afford their car payments, but it's still cheaper than transit? There's a lot of people. So I just think we need to focus on making the possibilities in this city. So that's another challenge I see. And then just nature in general. I mean, I love trees. I love parks. I love wildlife. Like, I love to see the squirrels. I like even the raccoons. I know not everyone's a fan, but I like when I hear coyotes howl. I heard coyotes howl for the first time in my life in Toronto. That was an unbelievable experience. And I love that, for us to be able to live, in harmony with our surroundings, and recognize that we depend on them to live. Like, we act like the environment is somehow a frill if we have enough money, or it can't get in the way of the economy. But to me, the environment is like the air that I'm breathing. Like, is it fresh? Is it going to cause asthma for my kids? Is it going to cause emphysema for an older adult? Like, is the air clean? Is the water fresh, drinkable, swimmable? That we need that for our life. Can we get food? Can we grow food in this city? Do we have access to food, in the fertile farmlands outside our border? So to me, that's the environment. It's not some like climate change goal that's made by the UN, or it's not something about how we should all change our light bulbs or whatever. It's like, how do we live with our life support systems and get supported by them and support them with our economic activity? And that's just, I feel that Toronto is still, we've made strides compared to some other cities and in the past, but we still could do so much. So that's, to me, those are the challenges. Like, and then I guess the fourth one, using the pulpit since it's my podcast, is this lack of participation. And that's one that's really just hitting me every day. How many people, it sounds like they have given up, how many people, it sounds like they find it easier to complain than to act. And I don't blame them. I've done my share of complaining. I know what it's like to complain. But the fact that we don't see there are possibilities for each of us, whatever it is in our day, there's so many possibilities. So that's a challenge, is like, how do we make sure our residents feel that they don't give up, that they see opportunity, that they see there's possibility? Like, that challenge for all those residents who not only don't vote, but also don't participate in other ways. That's a big challenge to me, because I feel from talking to people about their ideas, there's so many wonderful things that could happen in this city. And what if all that energy that was just, giving up, what if all that energy was spent on complaining was applied to something positive? I really, I would love to see that. So that's my final, and in some ways, biggest challenge, because I'm just one person, whether I'm the mayor or not the mayor. This world is composed of, 7 billion, 8 billion, whatever the number is now, people. And all of us are what matters, not just one person, with energy or ideas. So yeah, that's the challenge.
That's amazing. And in fact, I mean, that's again, back to why I just think it's so important that you are running, because and this maybe leads to my next question about sort of your vision for the city. But to me, I think people do lose hope and do become complacent when they don't feel like there's any point in participating, when they don't feel like their voice is really heard, or that change really happens, or that there's even really an outlet just to express concerns. So I think then it makes sense, right? As you say, that people start to just kind of go, oh, forget it. What's the point? Right. And, and the lack of participation, comes from that. So that to me is another reason why I'm so excited that you're running too, because it seems to me your vision for how the city would run is more about listening to those ideas and giving people that outlet and giving people opportunities to share and participate in the democracy. So maybe you can explain a little bit about that, because to me, I feel like you do really have solutions to that gets people off the couch and feeling like they do have a voice and feeling like there is an opportunity to express themselves and even get somewhere with those thoughts. So maybe you could explain a bit about that, and then just sort of how you see that. If you were mayor, how would you approach that differently?
Yeah. So that's like, sort of the vision of what it could be. And what I loved about this podcast is every time someone tells me what their vision could be, I start to see it. And so one of my visions is that it's so easy to participate in city decisions. And the other day I was walking home, and at the corner of St. Clair and Bathurst, there were two city staff with two big I don't know what placards, and they had stickies and little circles, and they were inviting residents as we walked by to take a look at pictures of 3 potential new parks and to say what we would like those parks to look like. And that is the kind of public consultation that we have not done in the past, that is the key to the future. And it doesn't have to just be about one tiny little park that's going in with the new condo. It could be about, major decisions. And so people were really excited to participate in that. I was, and so were other people who would never necessarily go to a public meeting, who, from my perspective, some of the meetings that I've gone to, I end up feeling frustrated because I'm like, I just spent 3 hours and they're probably not even going to use what I said. That's going to be a feeling you have. And yet for me, I just spent 10 minutes on my way home, sharing a conversation with them one-on-one. So I know they were listening. What they do with it, I don't know, but they were definitely listening to me. And it's okay what happens after this, because I got to be part of the decision-making in a way that didn't detract from the rest of my life, So my vision is that that's going on all over the place. Anytime there's a decision to be made, the local residents are consulted in a way that's completely open. They don't have to. The city wasn't forcing people to stop. It was just there for anyone who had their eyes open and wanted to participate. So that's one vision of that kind of civic involvement. And then another is like, just the idea of being able to join and support things that are going on. I think so much of our life, or at least kind of my life as an activist, has been like trying to stop what's going on that I don't like. And that is just a really tough battle, and it doesn't feel good, and it's frustrating, and you're up against someone who wants to do it. But whenever there's an opportunity to support something that I do like, or participate in something. So anytime there's a public concert, for instance, I've gone a couple of times. I've passed a public square and there's some musicians. Sometimes it's just a busker, but sometimes it's like a square and there's musicians. You could dance if you want. Like, imagine, to me, if I was walking around our city and there was music over there, and there was a little tiny food stall over there that didn't have $100,000 permit and a 10-year waiting list to be able to do it. Imagine if there was, if I was if anything, there was things for me to join. There was a public art display at the streetcar stop, not just a token thing, but actually the whole streetcar stop was a public art display. So imagine if there were all these different things that we could either watch as a spectator, that we could participate in, or that there was a decision that we could make. And so and again, this is where residents themselves have the ideas of how to participate. I spoke to an artist, and he was saying how vibrant the postering scene used to be. And then the city kind of made it illegal to put posters up, yet we have these giant billboards everywhere, which are barely contributing economically to our city, but are bombarding us with messages that just treat us as consumers, not residents. So anyways, this person I spoke to was like, it was so great to be able to put on your little tiny art show, put on a few posters letting people know what's happening. So residents have ideas on how to get people more engaged and how to get more people more involved. So I would just love to see that. That's part of my vision. And then just the other part is really just, again, with the integration of environment with our city life. And imagine if when we left our houses, we weren't just bombarded by traffic noise. We heard bird song, the air smelled fresh rather than engines spewing whatever in our faces. Like, imagine if, again, the water, like, what if the Don Valley Creek you could swim in? There's places where it's deep enough, no one would ever do it. But what if you could? What if the lake was never a bad water quality day? What if the pools were open and they were kind of pools that were designed with nature rather than dumped so much chlorine? I mean, these are big ideas. Obviously, I can already hear people going, that's not realistic, or that's not, but we're doing a visioning exercise. So everything is allowed. Everything that doesn't break the laws of thermodynamics is allowed for that experience or that exercise. So yeah, that's kind of the vision that I see, of just opportunities everywhere to participate, and also none of it is a burden. Because again, like that can be something that dampens participation, is if you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm the one who has to save this neighborhood from X. I'm the one who has to save that big stand of mature trees that the developer is going to cut down. And it's like this huge burden on us. But if it's suddenly like, oh, there's participation everywhere, there's opportunities everywhere, and I could just join it. And if I don't, there's still music being made. If I don't have time today, someone's still creating a beautiful meal for less advantaged people in our neighborhood, right? So knowing that freedom of being able to participate and not being obligated to, but just having those options, that to me is the vision of a wonderful day in our city.
It's a beautiful vision, Sarah. I love it. It's absolutely beautiful. And how could you, as much as you say, well, you can debate how much of it's realistic, how can you go against a vision like that? I mean, to me, that's just a beautiful place to live and a beautiful vision. And I actually think that it is easier than you might imagine. Like, you're not talking about building layers and layers of bureaucracy, and you're not talking about things that cost a lot of money. You're actually talking about dismantling some of that in the process and just allowing people, like you think about that person at the street corner, which I think was just such a great example. We're just showing people options, and they're so excited to have an opportunity to have a say and participate. That doesn't cost much at all. And it's not that hard to implement, really. So I think to me, it's your approach that is different more than, these are expensive, massive, unrealistic things. It's really just taking a different approach. It's saying the people and their voices matter. And we want to, at every opportunity and with every decision that has to be made in running a city, give the people a chance to participate in that. And that's basically what you're saying. And to me, I think that's pretty easily implemented. So I think it's a beautiful vision, and it's a doable vision, if you ask me. So
yeah, and it's a bit about decentralizing. Like, the city sort of has to give up trying to control everything, because that's what we're doing, and we're getting more and more paralyzed. Like, we have 200,000 bylaws. Our budget summary is 900 pages. That's just the summary. Like, we're building in all of these things that make it impenetrable for the resident to do, and burden city staff and politicians with an incredible amount of work. So if we decentralized a bit, like, we can't have, 10 residents vote on what the entire city budget should be, but we can have micro decisions happening all over the place. And as you say, it's just removing those layers. It's like, does the city really need to be in charge of X, Y, and Z? Or should we focus on A, B, and C and release X, Y, and Z and let the community sort it out for themselves? Some things are very important, and there is a role for government to maintain these standards for our society according to the majority of values in our society. But a lot of things we need to get our fingers out of and say, shoot, we're doing a bad job at it anyways. It's not like it's working, this micromanagement and over controlling. If we're doing a bad job of it, what if we just let it go, trust residents that they will do a good job, and we'll focus on the things that really matter?
That's great. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. So maybe just in terms of what you bring to that, I wouldn't mind just chatting briefly about, people always say, well, what makes you qualified to run for mayor? That's people's favorite question. And as far as I have to be an 18-year-old citizen of Toronto or something like that, right? So I think we're all qualified to run for mayor ultimately if we're 18 years or older, right?
Yes, we are.
But I know you have a whole lot more to offer than that. And I know, even just from my own personal experience, when we worked at World Wildlife Fund together, You were a very, very, very integral part of our endangered species campaign work and working with governments on a lot of change that we were trying to achieve there. So, you know, and that's a little while back. So, but I mean, you've had that experience. So I would just love to hear, and if you wouldn't mind sharing with others, just some of those kinds of things, and more specific to the city itself that you've been working on over the last couple of decades while trying to also raise a family in the city and do all the other amazing things that you do. But maybe just speak a little bit to that, just some of your experience where you feel like you've had a role in creating some of these changes and achieving some of this vision that you're talking about for the city.
Yeah, thank you, Carol, for the question. I mean, and it's always like, where do I start my story that's led me here? And I guess there's a couple of things. One is, well, genetically, I don't know what's in my genes, but I know my grandfather, who had a farm, was very frugal and not wasteful, and had a kind of attitude at the farm and in his life to be conservation minded before that was trendy. I think a lot of people of his generation had that as well. So, you know, maybe there's some genetics in me. But then when I was 9, or around 9 or 10, I was at a park, and it was covered with litter. And I just decided I'm going to clean up this park. And the feeling of what it looked like before and what it looked like after was just so deeply satisfying to see it, that change, that I think that stuck with me. And then I think I read an article in the Globe and Mail, and it was something about overpopulation or something. Again, I was very young, and it filled me kind of with fear. Like, oh my God, we're in big trouble. So I feel like a lot of my personal and professional life has been going between those two places. One is, oh, I feel so good to make positive change. And one is, oh my God, we're doomed. And I whenever I live in that world where we gotta act and so does everybody else, I found that's given me some energy, but it hasn't felt as good, and I don't feel it's been as productive. So I've gone to lots of protests. I've lots of letter writing campaigns, like all the things that you just kind of associate with traditional activism. I've done that route. And then there's the side that's like, oh, what it's so joyful to do something that it's beautiful and that improves the community and for ourselves. So I feel like my professional life, when you knew me, I worked at World Wildlife Fund for a couple of years. Then from World Wildlife Fund, I became so convinced that how we live in our cities was key to everything, including endangered species. So many of the issues around endangered species could be solved well before these species become endangered if we live better in our cities. So then I moved into the urban world, and I worked for a couple of different nonprofits, basically on solutions and options to the private car. So that, again, making those options easy, affordable, reliable, safe. I did it from a research side for a year or so, and then I did it as an executive director working with York University and Knoll Furniture Manufacturing and some other companies in Northwest Toronto on commuting programs for their employees. So I did a lot of that professional work, and a lot of it was, you know, there'd be the joyful times where I was working with people, and then there'd be the frustrating times where I was trying to work against something that was in place. And so when I got pregnant around the age of 30, I guess it was, I decided I wanted to really focus my life around seeing results from everything I did. So I had my first son, Jacob, and I was so just life transforming. And I just loved doing the dishes, and I loved, you know, making dinner and just things that sound so sort of mundane, but that to me are part of the fabric of life. And also, I knew I made dinner. Like, I could work in my office for 8 hours and write letters and go on telephone calls. And I wonder at the end of the day, what did I just do? What got done? What endangered species was saved? Like, what bus route? You know, we tried to get a bus route created. There were tangible things that happened, but at the same time, at the end of the day, you didn't know. Whereas when I had my little children, there was so much vibrancy to everything. So I really loved and explored that joyful part. And as they got older and I had a little bit more time, I got back into community work, primarily as a volunteer. I did have some consulting work. I did have some I worked in sort of gig economy jobs as well. Like I did some Uber delivery. I did some catering, serving the people, you know, that I'd be debating with at another time. I did and consulting with my old work as well. And then the volunteer work was, I did advocacy on getting a streetcar, priority streetcar in my neighborhood, St. Clair West. I got a crosswalk put in my local area. I got some pedestrian protection for a sidewalk nearby. I did some greening of our schoolyard with the trustee and our principal. So I just kind of lived in both places of trying to improve my community and trying to see the beautiful benefits of, you know, raising a family and working with my neighbors and all those sorts of things. So it's kind of been a very diverse history that I'm running on. And I guess when I ran 4 years ago, I just was hearing the media talk over and over again about how no one was running against John Tory. And the media does a good job of complaining, like many of us do. And so I suddenly saw this opportunity, like, wow, the media says no one's running against John Tory, and they're saying all these things are wrong, and I have like ideas for how we could solve all of them. I'm going to run. It's going to be so great. And so I ran for mayor, and it was a wonderful experience. And I learned that a lot of it's just talk. There were other people running for John Tory all along. It's just the media wasn't talking about them. And when I came in, they talked a little bit about me, but they spent a lot more time talking about who wasn't running than they did about who was. And so I learned, oh, okay, there's more to the story. But I also saw how much interest there was out there for change. It just wasn't being, you know, channeled. So then we had I ran for mayor, was good. I just got around 5,000 votes. I'm sorry, I'm going on really long. I'm going to try and go. And then I saw that, then we had John Tory be reelected. And we saw then in 2020, the COVID-19 phenomena arise and all the global response to that was similar in Toronto as it was elsewhere. And I really felt like, wow, I disagree with what we're doing. Like putting construction tape around playgrounds, not telling children to not see their grandparents. Like, you know, I'm not a epidemiologist or public, so I can't tell people what's good for them or not. But to have the government tell me I can't make my own personal health decisions when it comes to who I see, who I hug, who I stand next to, whether I can go to a local business that wants to stay open. I mean, the mandatory nature of what happened those 2 years was really, I was really upset about it. But then it caused this seismic change for me, because all of the people who I was working alongside with on cycling, on environmental issues, on social issues, suddenly they were saying that it was right wing, it was xenophobic, it was misogynist, it was racist to oppose COVID policies. And suddenly I saw this kind of like groupthink that I had myself been a part of, because I had assumed that people who didn't agree with me were on the wrong side and probably not great, didn't have good motivations, you know. So there was a time where I was like, wow, I could never run for office now, because I'm like, because of my views on some of this COVID policy, I guess I'm not the kind of person who would be welcomed or even maybe heard, because there was a lot of censorship going on as well. But we've come through this 2 years. There's been a lot of learning. You know, people still have strong opinions, but there's a lot more understanding that more nuanced approaches to life are necessary, and that there is collateral damage when you impose really draconian policies on people. And so there's a lot more interest out there in looking at life differently, looking at government control differently, and looking at politics differently. And so I decided in the provincial election, I didn't know who to vote for. I felt, you know, one party was promoting highways through farmland, which I didn't like. Another party was promoting vaccine mandates, which I didn't like, and kind of fundamental issues for me, both of those. So I sort of felt politically marooned, and I decided to officially decline my ballot. And I wrote about that. But when I left the ballot box, I felt not good about that decision. It just felt like, oh, here I was given a choice of options, and I didn't choose any of them. And those are the only options I was given. And to me, I feel like I should choose an option. So that's why I decided, well, I'm running for mayor then, because I can make a choice. everybody else can make whatever choice they want, but at least I can make the choice that feels good for me, and I won't abandon the political process, even though I've lost some faith in it. So that's what brought me to running again. And I felt that this campaign has been like a beautiful opportunity to practice everything that I'm preaching in it, because I've done a lot of collaborative work with other candidates. This podcast has been very collaborative. I've had people who, a lot of people who do agree with me on things, but also political candidates. So we don't really have any relationship outside of the podcast. I've had one person on who we have a completely different view of COVID, at least protests. And so that's been a really great opportunity to bring people together of different views. And then my mayoral debate that I held was also great to bring people together without a specific putting me up. It was just bringing us all together. And then also with my campaign, just doing all sorts of fun things that I like in life, singing, swimming, listening to people. So that's been my circuitous path to running. And that's what I have to offer, is just everyone has something to offer. And that's my unique combination. That's maybe a little different than, say, a CEO or someone who's been in politics for years and years and years. But if we don't want the status quo, maybe it's time to look a little bit outside of it.
Yeah, well, beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that, because honestly, it just, to me, it does speak to like, what does make someone qualified? Well, why is something like being a CEO in a past job or something like that, why does that make you more qualified? I know just from my own perspective, when we hire people at the company where I work, in terms of our hiring policy, just as an example, we can train people to do anything. If you're smart enough, if you've got an education, if you've got some basic abilities, you can be trained to do anything. But what you can't train someone for is everything you just spoke about, which is coming to the job with a certain approach, with a certain attitude, with a certain life experience. And yours comes from your personal life experience, as well as your professional life experience, as well as your volunteer experience, as well as your advocacy experience and your activism experience. So to me, you've got all of those things, and that's what makes you unique and special, and someone who would come to the job with all of that. And then, yeah, we got to do some budgets. Okay, let's sit down and figure out how to do the budgets. Like, that's a practical thing. To me, I want to get behind someone who shares values that I have, and shares a vision that to me is a better vision than the one we currently have. So, and has life experiences, and thank you for sharing your family life experiences, because those are so important, right? And when you think about all of the experiences you've had, everything from having children to, the activism work to the professional in an office kind of work, whatever it is, those are all things that build resilience, that, teach you how to deal with conflict, put you through the ringer, and then you get up and you go at it again. Like, those are all amazing life experiences, professionally and personally, that to me, those experiences combined with your vision and your approach and your values, to me, is what makes you so special and so unique and such a great choice for mayor. So I just really appreciate that answer. And I that to me is the most important thing. It's how we hire, and we have the best people on our team than I can ever imagine, because we hire in that way. So if we were just looking for somebody who had a specific skill set, we wouldn't even interview them, right? We'd just look at the piece of paper and sure, you're in. So anyway, I just think that's wonderful. And thank you for sharing all of that. And maybe we should think about wrapping up. I just have a couple more things that I want to ask you. And then if there's anything else you want to say, obviously the floor is yours. And the podcast is yours, so you can say whatever you want. But maybe just a kind of a two-parter here. If I think about an individual listening to this, how is their life going to be different? I mean, we've talked a little bit about how you see Toronto differently and how you have a vision for Toronto that looks a little different and really kind of connects people with nature and connects people with participatory democracy. And you see it as a beautiful place where everyone can breathe clean air and drink clean water and participate. But if I'm just sitting here on my couch listening today, how does my life change for the better? And maybe to some degree you've answered that, but if there's anything else, you know, just in terms of an individual person in Toronto listening to this, if you have any thoughts about that, that would be great. And then also just what can they do right now? Maybe just to wrap up with that, like, is there anything you would say to someone listening that they could do to get involved, to participate right now in our democracy and in our city?
That's a really good two-part question. It's different. It's different than the one I ask, and I like the part, and it's because it relates to my campaign. How is your life going to be better if you vote for me? And so I think it's a really interesting question because it is kind of what people ask. Well, what are you going to do for me? And my answer is, I don't know. How will your life be better? That is a question for each of us. I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to make your life better. I would like you to go to vote.sarah.ca and see all my proposals and consider how they might help your life. You know, how will it help your life to have more housing, to have our streets with more safety and more room for, whether it's a street cafe, whether it's a bicycle, wheelchair area, whether it's a rapid transit line. You know, how would it make your life better to have a more transparent government, have more opportunities for participation, to drop, you know, have free TTC, or at least free TTC for seniors right now. So I'd love people to look through my platform and ask themselves, will that make my life better? And ultimately, to me, what I hope you'll get out of voting for me is, if you choose that you have a vision that aligns with mine, or you're interested in my approach, your life will be better because you just took action. You just went to the voting ballot and you felt good about your choice, and you made that choice, and you did that, and you can pat yourself on the back for participating in this giant city, in this big democracy, in the way that was available to you. So to me, that's one way I hope it can make your life better, because I know there is so much. I mean, how often do we feel really good about voting? I don't often feel really good about my choice. And so I would love to be, whether that's for 5,000 people or 500,000 or, you know, 3 million, or maybe it won't be 3 million because we don't have that many voting people in Toronto, but whatever number that is, if they felt good about their choice, that's how their life would be better to me. And then, yes, what you do with it. And it's same for me, is that if I look to politicians or the media or whoever to make my life better, well, I'm putting all my power in their hands, right? And so for me, it's like, it's not my question for them is, what are you going to do for me? It's like, what are you offering? What are you offering? And what can I do with what you're offering? And so that's what I'm bringing here, is like, I'm not really promising so much as I am offering. And if that offer is, if you want to take me up on it, I would love to work together on how we make all of our lives better after October 24th. And so then the final question is, what can people do? And I'm glad to answer this one. I mean, obviously, what can people do right now? They can go to my website, vote.sarah.ca. They can vote for me on October 24th. Absolutely. But what can they do? That's only, you know, that's less than 2 weeks away. It'll be one day, it'll be over. I'll be elected, or someone else will be. And we'll keep moving with our lives. So what can we do to create this vision? And it's a question I will keep asking myself as well after October 24th, whether it's as mayor or not as mayor. And what I think is, I guess, 3 things, and I'm actually probably going to make up them as I go along. But the first thing to me is open our eyes, look around and see what's out there, see what's possible, see what's being offered. And there's a lot more out there than we think, especially when we're in the frustrated or angry or sad place. So first, it's like, people, what can you do? Open your eyes. You might be surprised by what you see. The second thing is, participate. You know, I was talking to an artist and he was saying, he would like Torontonians to be more engaged in the arts. And I was saying, yeah, it's tough. Sometimes it's like, oh, it's Friday night. It's so comfy on my couch and I could read a book, or I could stay in or whatever. Or I could go see a comedy show, or I could go to, and he was saying, for people who feel like it's too much effort to go out and participate, ask yourself, why are you living in Toronto? And I thought that was such a good question, because why am I living in Toronto? It's to take advantage of what Toronto has to offer. If I want to just watch Netflix, I can go live anywhere. I don't need to be here. So participate. If people, ask yourself, why am I here? And it's a philosophical question too. Why are we even here to live? I think it's to participate and to be involved. So, and then I guess the third point, and that's the one I was like, what will my third point be? But it's just to, I guess, appreciate, and be grateful, not in the, like, you better be grateful, because that, who's grateful when you force yourself to be, but just notice everything that there is for us, from the ground under my feet to my friend Carol, who's willing to spend time with me, to, the tree outside my window. I had an interview yesterday on the radio and I was really nervous about it. And there was a little potted plant there. And I was like, oh, look at that potted plant just here. Doesn't care if I say the wrong thing. It's doing its thing. And similarly, I was at a debate yesterday, and one of the candidates, Isabel Gamp, she has 2 little chihuahuas she brings on her wheelchair with her. And at one point I was thinking, wow, this debate is going on for a really long time. Is it still somewhere that I want to be? Should I try and have us wrap it up? It was very long. And I looked at them and I saw they were just sitting there happy, just listening. If they ever got too hungry, they would have gotten up. If they really had to go to the bathroom, they'd do something. But otherwise, they're just sitting there. And I thought, that's wonderful. So I can just appreciate where I am and be grateful for those cute little dogs to add something special to the debate, and to be grateful for that potted plant. And there's so much to be grateful for. And so if we just allow ourselves, not force ourselves to be grateful, but just allow ourselves to notice what might be around that's making our lives just a little bit better, I think that always brings a good feeling. So there's my 3, what we can do. And then I'll just finish and say, and you can vote, and you can vote. You can vote on October 24th.
Nice. Well, I loved your number 3, because I am thankful for you today, Sarah. And, just to go back to what I said at the very beginning and in wrapping it up, I am so thankful that you have made the decision to run for mayor for the 2nd time. And I am just so thankful for you and for your vision for our city, and for just being that bright light of change and hope, and thinking about every single person in this city, and being willing to speak to anyone who wants to share an idea. You have boundless energy for that, and boundless excitement for our city, and passion for our city, and interest in getting everyone involved in our city. So that answer was just beautiful, and I am thankful for you today. So thank you for giving me this chance for this conversation, and to be able to share with others some more about your vision. And so just thankful for you today, and thankful for you and everyone else who's running for mayor and is willing to put themselves out there and take on this challenge, and to try to make our city a better place. So thank you to everyone, and thank you to you today, Sarah.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you to all the listeners. Everyone have a great day.